This is the World Organic News podcast for the week ending the 8th of January 2017. Jon Moore reporting. This week, indeed this year, begins with an article from the National Post entitled How Organic Farming Will Save Us All If We Can Throw Away Our Antiquated Notions of What It Means. And the title says it all. We live in times of minutely defined identity. Each of us is encouraged to define ourselves as some combination of words that describes our family status, sexual orientation, voting intentions, lifestyle, and who knows what else. That people have bought into this way of seeing themselves mean they must also place others within a category or combination of categories. Hence I quote from the article, quote, "If there is a stereotype of the organic farmer, it's that they spend their days wrapped in droopy clothes made of hemp and burlap, becoming one with nature while foraging for chanterelles." End quote. The truth, of course, is much bigger than that. Yes, there are organic farmers like those described, but, and I quote again from the article, quote, "The reality of many organic farmers couldn't be further from the truth. For those serious about agriculture free of synthetic chemicals, farming is a complex system that requires endless days of laborious work with the potential to yield lucrative results." End quote. Indeed, the business of organic farming is as much a cerebral one as it is physical. A knowledge of so many disciplines is required: agronomy, entomology, soil science, animal husbandry, meteorology, algebra, accounting, hydrology, history, and I could go on. But I will spare you. Quite often these things are just within the lifetime of each organic farmer's experiences. Sometimes they need to be studied. The author of the original post I'm quoting from, Claudia McNally, goes on to use one farm as an example. Brent Preston gave up his office job to grow food, or as he is quoted later in the piece, grow soil. Quote, "Well-managed, nutrient-dense soils are the guiding light to finding success in self-sustaining organic agriculture. It's not just something you can do for 10 years or 100 years until the soil is exhausted," says Preston. "The goal is every year your soil is better than it was the year before." End quote. Now we know, or should know by now, chemical-based farming destroys soil health. Dead soil is just dirt, and dirt eventually blows away. The death of soil through chemical agriculture is, or usually is, a slow process. This is the deal with the devil I've discussed in earlier episodes. 1% soil loss per year for increased short-term returns. Unfortunately, 1% a year is a compound interest situation. This means not much appears to be happening for 5, 10 or even 20 years, but the bill will come due, and these bills always come at the worst time. Drought, flood and or fire seem to accompany these payments. Cover crops, rotational grazing and cropping are all part of a system which grows soil. Again, a lengthy quote. For millennia, crop rotation, the practice of moving crops and livestock around to ensure too much of one nutrient is never depleted, was the go-to method for maintaining soil health. During the Middle Ages, three-field rotation, a system where one field is allowed to rest every crop cycle, took over. Variations on this was the standard method of farming until less than a century ago, when increased food production became the goal. This meant that all available farmland would be put to use to grow crops. End quote. This meant that all available farmland would be put to use to grow crops. Yes, this was the deal with the devil. Not only was monoculture encouraged as scientific, the use of a single variety across all locations was encouraged, or in some locales, mandated from above. Locally adapted varieties were lost, generations of selection tossed into the dustbin of history. We still have time to retrieve some of these species, but we must act quickly. We can also start the process of selecting for local varieties ourselves by using open-pollinated, non-hybrid varieties. Each season selects for the next. Evolution is relentless and uncaring. We can work with it or be steamrolled by it. Above all, organic farming is about people. Organic farms tend to be smaller than, say, corn or wheat farms, yet they are far more profitable on a per-acre basis. Once cereal subsidies are removed, they become more so. Quote, "Organic farms generate more money per acre than their conventional counterparts. Even though they are not as big, they are usually more profitable. The amount of money we generate per acre on the farm is many multiples per acre of what our neighbours produce growing cash crops, says Preston. A well-run, small-scale organic farm will generate somewhere in the neighbourhood of 40,000 gross sales per acre. Corn and soy, known as cash crops, generate an average of $300 per acre, according to a 2016 paper published in the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Economics at the University of Illinois, end quote. It is the huge number of acres planted to corn and soy which make them viable and which are destroying soil at an increasing pace across the globe. In essence, the difference between a broadacre monoculture and a small area organic farm is one of thought. Much more planning, thinking and pondering is required of the small area farmer than the broadacre ploughing enterprise. The latter may have fed the world during the 60s and 70s, but it was also the improvements in transportation worldwide that did much more on that front. We have managed to grow more food than the world population needed since about 1850. Political indifference, poor transportation and wars are the reasons most people have starved. Ireland was, after all, exporting wheat to England as her citizens were starving to death during the potato famine. Independent small area farmers, yeomen if you like, have throughout history been a troublesome, cantankerous class. A ballast against change, think of the lack of revolution in the UK in 1848, the cutting edge of revolution, the US War of Independence, and the manpower for classical Greek and Roman Republican armies. These people are thinkers. They have to be to survive. Given the inane, mindless consumerism of our current, in air quotes, developed world, I would suggest we need cantankerous thinkers more than ever. Joel Salatin springs to mind. Our soils certainly need their care and attention. Take a position. Even if you only grow a rosemary bush in a plant pot, you have made a statement. And nor your representatives until we see the end of subsidies for big ag and those funds redirected to farmers' markets, school ag education programs, and the world of a shorter, safer food supply chain. Nothing changes until those in power are forced to change. Let's make our local food producers the new celebrities. Just think how different our world will be. And that brings us to the end of this week's podcast. If you've liked what you've heard, could you please follow the link in the show notes and vote for World Organic News in the Australian Podcast Awards? Thanks in advance. Any suggestions, feedback or criticisms of the podcast or blog are most welcome. Email me at podcast@worldorganicnews.com. Thanks for listening and I'll be back in a week.